over the years seen people fail or make silly financial mistakes, and it's not because they're not intelligent or not smart. A lot of times the reason, me included, make silly financial decisions is we're not making the financial decision with all the information. Hi, welcome to PlanAssist podcast, where we help people make better financial decisions, and we interview successful people or people experts in specific fields, and we always start each podcast off with the same exact question. If you could go back and give your younger self financial advice, what would it be? Today, I am doing the third in a three-part series on the principles of PlanAssist as a way to kind of set up what is PlanAssist, that I think if you understand kind of the three core principles as you listen to these podcasts where we're interviewing successful people, it'll actually make more sense. So today what I'm doing is the third of the three. And the first is have a plan. The second is be diversified. And then the third is seek counsel. Today, we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about the seek counsel and how to best do that. I'm Tim Clifford. I'm a certified financial planner. And I started my career off on the floor of the commodity exchanges in Chicago. And then I moved into the stocks and bond business and worked for three of the bigger financial services firms. I worked for Charles Schwab and Company. I worked for H&R Block Financial Advisors. And I worked for Ameriprise. And then in 2012, I actually started my own investment practice with the goal of helping individuals either maintain their wealth or grow their wealth or some combination of the two. And very early on, it became really clear that I needed to have some framework around what exactly am I helping people with and how am I helping them make decisions with less stress, be much more specific about here's what I'm actually going to do, and then be more intentional in making those financial decisions. And what I did is I went through and looked at research and talked to different people and looked at people that I knew who had been successful. And I came up with three core principles based on people who I know have been successful and people who I know haven't been successful but should have been. And that's really where I kind of found these three, because the people who are successful seem to have done them, and the people who are really challenged from a financial perspective don't do them or haven't done them. So today, what I'm going to do is spend just kind of a quick overview of 3 points that I think the seeking counsel can help with. But before I do, let me just set this up a little bit. Over the years, seen people fail or make silly financial mistakes, and it's not because they're not intelligent or not smart. A lot of times the reason, me included, make silly financial decisions is we're not making the financial decision with all the information. So if you look back on some of the silly financial decisions you've made, think about it like all of a sudden you're like, well, that just made total sense when I was making that financial decision. But now you look back 2, 3, 4 years back and you say, well, gosh, had I thought about it like this, it looked like a silly mistake. But so sometimes, not sometimes, probably most of the time when we make bad financial decisions, it's because we didn't gather enough information or there was some part of the picture we were missing. So we didn't have the full picture. And so today, what I'm going to kind of take us through is 3 steps that can help you with that area. So the first is get educated. Make sure you understand what investments you're doing. The second is confirmation bias. That pretty much shows up in everything from a perspective of making financial decisions. And the third is ensure that as you're making those financial decisions that you're doing it in the right order. So let me just spend a few minutes on education. So on the education piece, the goal is if it's a relatively small financial decision, maybe you only have to talk to 2 or 3 sources. And when I say talk, I include doing research, right? That includes using AI as a fantastic resource as an example to make sure you're asking the right questions. But it's how many, where are you going to make sure that you're getting the right amount of information so you understand the cost of the investment or the cost both doing it and not doing it. What are the trade-offs? What are the different options when you look at, how you can actually do this? Can you do it online? Do you go do it, in person? Do you do it with someone? Do you do it on your own? And then kind of what's the outcome of each one of those processes? One thing as you're doing your education, there's something that's kind of important about the seeking counsel part, at least think about, is there's 2 types of seeking counsel. There's formal counsel, there's formal advice, and then there's informal advice. So think of formal advice as advice that you're paying for. So if you go see an attorney and get a will done, that's formal. If you go get your taxes done by somebody, formal. You sit down and hire a financial advisor, not just sit down with them and get some information, but actually hire them. That would turn into formal advice. And where if someone's just giving you their opinion, that's informal advice. So if you Google it, 1-800 number, listen to a radio show, YouTube, include AI is included in that. That's informal advice because you're not paying for it and there's no consequences. So the best way to think about it is when you're working through and getting information and getting educated on your investment decision, you really want to probably include both formal and informal for the bigger financial decisions, just to make sure you're not missing something. But think of it as the formal advice, there's consequences to the person. So they're probably going to give a little more conservative advice, because if they give you bad advice, there could be consequences to that. They have a responsibility and an accountability to actually give you good advice, where the informal advice, someone's just giving you opinion, there's no accountability, there's no, go do this or go do that. If you do it or don't do it, it's up to you, and whatever happens is kind of in your court, right? So it's up to you to do something with that. So just think about it as educating yourself, make sure you understand all your different options, kind of what's the costs, etc. The second is confirmation bias. Now, what you're looking for here is you need to mute confirmation bias, because it will show up in just about everything you do from making a financial decision. And what happens is very, very subconscious. So if I decide that I want to invest in whatever, pick a stock, a mutual fund, buy a piece of real estate, what will happen is almost immediately I'll start just gathering information that gives me best case scenario, and pretty much hyper focus on that stuff that confirms that is a good idea. And then the information that gives me the opposite of that, though I may at least stumble across it or glance over it, I don't really internalize the other side of it. So think of confirmation bias as making sure that you're covering both the best case, the worst case, and then the likely case scenario. The best example of that is Charlie Munger was doing a Q&A during one of the Berkshire Hathaway shareholder meetings, and someone asked him, what's the best financial lesson you learned? And with no pause, immediately he said, invert everything. That was the best lesson he ever learned. And he tells the story of when he was in the service, he was a weatherman for the pilots, and his job was basically to tell the guys going out on a mission what the weather was going to be. And he found that if he gave them the good weather, it almost added no value to their missions, to their success, or to their failure. It really, what he needed to do was focus on the bad weather, there's thunderstorms in the area, there's low clouds, there's ice, there's rain. Those were kind of the main things that he wanted to focus on, was actually the inversion of good weather, or the bad side of it. And then he said he took that into his real estate career and also at Berkshire Hathaway. And basically, in kind of a summary, is make sure that you're looking at both sides of that equation when you're making a financial decision, and you'll make a better one by doing that, or at least you'll be prepared that there is another outcome that could come of this particular decision, and what's the worst case of that. And then finally, as you're making financial decisions, it's important that you put them in some sort of order. And because I have seen people make pretty good financial decisions, but do them in the wrong order, and they cancel each other out. So it either turns into a not so good of a financial decision, or a bad financial decision in some cases, because they did it in the wrong order. Kind of a good example of that is if someone's paying an extra $1,000 a month on their house, trying to get their house paid off, and they have a 3.5% mortgage as an example. And then I'll ask them, I'll say, well, are you maxing out your 401k? Are you putting $30,000 a year in their 401k? And they'll say, no, I'm putting in what gets matched. So if the company matches half of up to 4%, they're putting 8% in, so they're getting 12. So that sounds really, really good, but they're not coming anywhere close to putting the $30,000+ they can put into their 401k on an annual basis. So that's an example of they might be better off not putting extra payments on their house and max out their 401k. At least start there and then come back and start paying off the house if they want to do that. But that's a kind of a funny example, or, again, simple example, but almost all financial decisions have an order attached to them. So if you're building a house, you have to do it in the right order to make sure that house is built right. The same thing's true with good financial management discipline is you want to make sure you're doing it in the right order. One of the things that I just want to kind of finish on is the real enemy of building wealth is not the economy. It's not the markets like a lot of people will think, because they'll be watching these financial news shows. And remember, if you're listening to the radio or a financial news show on TV, even most of your YouTube financial channels, those are more entertainment design than they are informational design. And I know that might be a shock to some of you, but it's not all that far away from watching a Sunday morning pre-show NFL show, and they're talking about the different professional football games that are going to happen this afternoon. They're just kind of saying the same thing about different stocks and bonds. So I'm not saying you shouldn't listen to those shows, but you definitely want to put them in the right perspective, and that's really not our single biggest challenge. Our biggest challenge when we're making financial decisions is making sure that we have all the information to make the best financial decision, and then that we're doing it in the right order. That's really our single biggest challenge. And in order to do that, we have to get good at seeking counsel. And when I use seeking counsel, I get a lot of feedback on this. They'll say, I don't like seeking counsel. I want you to use get advice or be input or something like that. I don't care what words you use with seeking counsel. I really struggled with what's the right word for that third principle. And I settled that I think it's seeking counsel personally, but think of it more like make sure that you're asking and getting input from a multitude of sources, and you're getting it from both formal in some cases, not always. You don't have to always pay for the advice if it's a relatively small financial decision, but if it's a big one, you probably want to pay someone to make sure that you get it done right, or at least you get what the right decision would be, even if you don't necessarily follow it, and then get enough input from the informal decisions that you can come to a conclusion that you feel really confident about, and you've thought about it over a time frame, not just, okay, here's what I'm going to do, and here's what it looks like in the next 6 months, 12 months, 18 months. But really, financial decisions need to be looked at over the next year, 5 years, and decade. And, you hear a lot of people will talk about, and I kind of live by this quote, a lot of people will overestimate what they can do in a year, but completely underestimate what you can do in a decade. And I think that's true when it comes to building wealth and being financially independent. So with that, I'll leave with one quote. Financial success is not an event. It's the accumulation of all the financial decisions you made over the last couple decades. So any one of those individual financial decisions that you make probably doesn't make that much of a difference. But if you kind of put them on top of each other and connect all the dots, they can make a huge difference in net worth over a long period of time. So get a process on how you make good financial decisions over and over again. And I think you'll find that it includes 3 core principles: have a plan, be diversified, and seek counsel. With that, I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did like it, please subscribe. And then if you have any comments or suggestions or disagree with me, feel free to add your notes or add a comment below. So with that, have a great day.